Welcome back to the More Alive podcast. I am your host, Andrea Crowder. I have a really special episode today. We have a voicemail from one of our listeners, Leah. And so I'm going to go ahead and play that. And we're going to do a little Q to your A for today. And I didn't even mean to rhyme.
Good morning. I'm messaging you from Central Kentucky with a request for insight. When you have made transformation, when you have created new levels within your life, how did that feel within your body? And what were different tools that you used in order to embrace it fully? And I'd also like to know, what is it like for you now? What does it feel like to have the freedom of money? I'm coming from the position of being a single mom, creating structures and systems in order to have a life that serves both my daughter and myself with freedom, ease, and flow, and abundance. However, I find myself in a position that it's challenging to see outside of survival. I've been doing a lot of the work, and I'm curious if you can touch on what that feels like, the ease, the flow, and the visceral experience of having moved from complete survival into absolute abundance. Thank you.
First of all, Leah, you're such an inspiring mother, and your children are so lucky to have someone that is willing to ask the question, that's willing to show up, that's willing to do the hard work, which is create something new out of what appears to be nothing. I remember when I got pregnant with my son, it was just a couple of weeks after I'd almost overdosed on so much cocaine that I wasn't even speaking English anymore. And that night, I had been with a group of people. One of the people that were at the party, he kept talking about his friend that had just gotten out of jail. And he said, yeah, I just got back from spending time with my homeboy, so-and-so, who just got out of jail for killing that guy like 5 years ago. And even though I was high as fuck, I started doing the math, and the name rung a bell. And I counted backwards, and I was like, 5, 4, 3. And I asked him, I gave him his last name. I said, is this who you're talking about? And he said, yes. And I said, that guy isn't dead, and that guy is my dad. It was my stepdad, actually, that this young kid who had been going through a gang initiation, he was 14. I think it was also 14 at the time, had gone into a gas station. And my stepdad had been working there during the nights to make some extra money, and held him at gunpoint, stole, I think it was like $40 in a carton of cigarettes, and then shot him. And the bullet was the width of about, I think it was like 3 or 4 playing cards. Like if you're playing a deck of poker, away from his heart. And so when I looked at this guy who was talking about his friend who had just gotten out of jail, I said, that's actually my dad. He's not dead at all. And he looked at me, and he felt so bad that he just took the entire board of cocaine. He pushed it across the table, like very slowly, and was like, here, have as much as you want. And I did so much cocaine, so much ecstasy, like whatever was there, I did it that night, that I don't know how I survived. I didn't get out of bed for about 25 hours. And I swear to God, my son was just in like soul form, looking at the rest of my soul family, and was like, she's not gonna make it. Like somebody tagged me in, and he like jumped into my uterus. And I got pregnant when I was 19 years old. I was a teen mom. I had come from the world of, we didn't have a lot. I actually thought my friend who had a 2-story house, I thought she lived in a mansion. I came home from hanging at her house and I was like, Mom, Connie lives in a mansion. And she's like, no, that's not what a mansion is. But because there were stairs, I was like, this is the biggest house that I've ever seen. I primarily lived in like small apartments or mobile homes or trailers, some of them that didn't have running water and some that also had little rats scurrying around the floor. My dad actually reminded me of that on an earlier episode of the podcast when I brought him on. And I had completely forgotten that, we slept on the floor in the living room of this 1-bedroom trailer before my dad had like ripped the metal off of the back of it. And he like hand built 2 really small bedrooms back there. But at first it was just all of us kids sleeping on the floor, all in my dad's army issued sleeping bags with these like really itchy wool blankets to keep us extra warm. And it was just like humble beginnings, but so humble I didn't really know. And I think sometimes when we get started with this transformation journey, we have this perception that we're starting from nothing. And especially if we're living in what we might call survival, or if we're living paycheck to paycheck. I know what it feels like to actually be living in survival with like, we had food that was very specifically rationed out of you're allowed to have this much. Once it's gone, it's gone. And splitting it amongst all of us kids, depending on who was there. If I was at my dad's for the summer, I was living with my dad, my stepmom, Robin at the time, and her kids. Sometimes there was 5 of us. Sometimes there was 6. Honestly, I have no idea. I don't remember. But our lives felt so full, even though the rest of the world would say like, those kids are living in survival. Those parents are living in survival. And so what made the difference? The difference is perspective. The difference is the story that we tell. There's this song that I love. It is called I Have Been 1,000 Different Women. I'll read the lyrics to you. The lyrics go, make peace with all the women you once were. Lay flowers at their feet. Offer them incense and honey and forgiveness. Honor them and give them your silence. Listen, bless them, let them be, for they are the bones of the temple you sit in now. For they are the rivers of wisdom leading you towards the sea. I have been 1,000 different women. I have been a kid that didn't have running water with rats scurrying across the floor. I've been a teen mother. I have been a drug dealer. I have been a stripper, somebody trading her body in exchange for money and fucked concept of self-importance. I have been 1,000 different women. And when I started my business with a little bit of money left on a credit card, because we were already $100,000 in debt, I stood on the bones of all of them. I stood on the wisdom of all of them. I think that the reason that you would even send a question to me today, because sometimes that still perplexes me. Like, how did I become someone that other people would ask how to live, how to grow, how to thrive, how to excel, how to earn? How did I become someone who started with nothing, according to the rest of the world, who started in survival? How did I become the host of the More Alive podcast? How did I become the, creator of the pleasure model and of programs like Amore Money and wealth alignment patterns? How did I become a go-to voice when it comes to nervous system related wealth? I think the reason for that is because I wasn't resourced. I was hungry. If you walk around and you look at any successful person that you know, just start watching people. Anybody that you would consider as successful, whether you're watching them online or whether you're watching them in person, if you can get yourself into the room with other successful people, just watch them and you'll see that they're not always the ones that have the answer. They're not always the one that has the resources, but they are without a doubt every single time the one who is the most hungry. They are willing to resource themselves. If there was an earthquake, I can guarantee that if it split in half between, I believe you said daughter. Was it daughter? Yeah. I believe you said daughter. If the earth split in half and your daughter was on the other side, there is not a doubt in my mind that it would take you less than a second to begin building the bridge. You will not know how, you will not give a fuck, but you will build it anyway, because you will be hungry enough to restore the connection between you and your baby girl. And I can say baby girl because my 20-year-old is sitting in the room and she's still my baby girl. I don't know how old your daughter is. So sometimes it feels like we don't have enough or we're in survival. And the reality is that the external world changed as soon as my internal world changed too. I stopped telling the story that I was in survival when I wanted to go to this event in order for me to learn new skills to grow my business. I was going to have to get on a plane. I was going to have to pay for a hotel. We didn't have the money. And so I didn't sit there and say, like, I'm in survival. I don't have these resources. I looked for where I could find them, which was I didn't go grocery shopping for the next 2 weeks and we just ate whatever was in the freezer. And a lot of times we don't realize the treasure that's all around us that we can turn into a resource the second that we need it if we're willing to get creative. And I would say that creativity and that hunger paired together create the most unstoppable force this planet has ever seen. And I know you have it in you. I know you have it in you. I think sometimes we just need to see it in others to remind ourselves that it's in us too. Without a shadow of a doubt, I heard it in your voice. I heard the hunger because you even asked the question at all. There's plenty of people that are listening to this episode. We've had, hundreds of thousands of downloads, and there's very few people that are like, you know what? I'm going to click that link. I'm going to ask a question and I'm going to get my needs met. I'm going to figure out the next step for me, but you did. The hunger's in you. And if you start to notice, you'll see it in 1,000 different ways. I've said on previous episodes, God didn't ask us if we knew how. He only asked, are you willing? And clearly you are. So I don't know where it is that you're trying to go. I don't know what that looks like for you. I don't know what you want, but I know that you can. There are 3 things in this world that tend to be beliefs that keep people stuck. And the second that we recognize what they are, the sooner we can disassemble them and take away their power. And beliefs only have power because typically when we think about them, they're very vague in our mind. So I'll tell you what I mean by that. Our fears are vague. Our truth is not. So the belief systems that get in our way would be either, I don't believe I'm capable. I already know you believe that for yourself, or you wouldn't have asked this question. I don't believe I'm worthy. That might be one for you. Or if I have it, or if I do it, I'll lose love. So it's the fear of loss. Now, the fear of loss sometimes can come either in the doing it or the having done it. So we might ask ourselves, okay, let me paint the picture. Let me close my eyes for a second. Let me get present. What is the version of Leah look like? Absolutely resourced. How does she stand? What's her posture? What does she know? What does she wear? Who does she speak to? Who does she not speak to? What does she tolerate? What does she not tolerate? Notice her spine. What does she know deep in her bones? Where is she? What has she done? What's different? What's desirable? What makes you hungry? See the vision that makes you hungry. For me, I always come back to, I want to be the resource that my kids can depend on. I always think about my daughter running up to me and asking me questions about investments. And there's a version of me that would have been like, I really fucking don't know. I don't know how to help you. And so I became the woman that could help. I became the woman who was resourced. I became the woman who knew how to ask. And she stood differently than I had been at the time when I started this work, probably back in 2020. And really, it only took about 2 years to become her. And that might seem like a really long time, but if you just look back and you think about what was going on 2 years ago, it probably feels like that happened pretty quickly. So even though when we look forward, 2 years can feel really far, when we look backwards, we realize it's total bullshit. And we know it's not. 2 years goes by in a blink of an eye. So I started doing this work, creating this version of me that knew, the version of me that was resourced, the version of me that felt sure, the version of me that knew who to ask. And I got really familiar with what she smelled like, what she looked like, what flavors she liked, who she hung with, who she didn't. And I started making decisions as her. Your future self is built in the very present moment. The only shot that you have at changing something is only ever going to be in this very sweet, precious, perfectly your moment. So as I thought about her frequently, I started making decisions as her. But the question that I didn't know to ask then, that I think maybe would have collapsed time for me sooner, was, what's the shit getting in my way? What's creating static in order for me to vibrate at that frequency? And the work is just removing the static. And so I might think about her, and then I would put my hand on my heart and I would say, okay, if there's typically 3 core beliefs that would get in my way, one of them being, do I believe I'm capable? So just notice as I ask these 3 questions, put your hand on your chest and really tune into your body and notice where there's like an ick or or like a charge, but it feels like your energy just goes down, like it's depleting the battery just a bit, maybe very, very subtle. So really tune in. So think of her, think of that future self that's like, God, I want that. God, what I would give to be her right this second, what I would give to collapse time into that and just run like face first into her. And then ask, do I believe I'm capable? Am I worthy? And then if I have it, what would I lose? Or if I do it, what would I lose? Is there a fear of loss? I asked this question to one of the women in my nervous system safety wealth program called Wealth Alignment Patterns. And she said, I asked her, think about going beyond where she is. So she's like, Andrea, I've made $100,000 for the last couple of years. Amazing. Like, what a pinnacle of success. What a milestone for a woman in online business. And yet, when we've done something for a few years, we're kind of itching to want to grow, to expand, to show ourselves we're capable of moving beyond this space. I suspect you're kind of in that right now, where you're thinking, I'm just ready to move beyond the space. I'm ready for things to be different. I'm ready for more. I'm ready for experience. And so I asked her those 3 questions. I said, imagine yourself and you've broken through this plateau. What does that look like? And she described it to me as, I'm trying to remember, I think she had multiple homes and she was describing her multiple homes and her experience. She was instantly already very clear. She had already done some of the future self work of giving herself that like future self anchor point that was very meaningful to her, that felt like it was really driving her. She was hungry for it. She really wanted it. And then I said, okay, see her there. And now ask yourself, put your hand on your heart and say, am I capable? Am I worthy? And am I afraid to lose if I do it or if I have it? And her eyes shot open instantly. And she said, if I have it, I'll lose love. And I said, great. Who are you afraid of losing? And she said, my lineage. And so her family comes from a very a poverty background. Typically in our society, Anybody who is struggling, anybody who is surviving, we also declare them as what we might call an underdog. We're like, these people are the ones who we admire. They're just making it, but they always do. We tell this story about them. But if you look at the movies, who are all the villains? The villains are the rich people. I don't think that's on accident. I don't think it's a secret that people don't want us to adore wealthy people. People don't want us to believe that that is something that if I achieve it, I can still be good. There's a lot of times where we look at wealth and we instantly attach moralistic programming of goodness or badness around wealth. And I stopped a while ago. I said, what did I say to you guys earlier? I said, our fears are vague. The truth is not. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, because I've done this thousands of times now at this point in my career, doing this work for my private clients and with people in my programs. And that is when we're in the presence of truth, suffering eliminates itself. So let's bring some truth into the story. When we think about what it means to be good versus bad, what does that mean? What I would do next is I would go Google, like, what does this word actually mean? I was talking to someone last week and she said, oh, I don't want people to think I'm weird. And I said, well, what's weird mean? And I said, if we're weird, what are we afraid to lose? And she says, I'm afraid I'll lose connection. And I said, amazing. So if we want to keep connection, do we want to tell the truth or do we want to tell a lie? And she said the truth. And I was like, amazing. Okay. So truth creates connection. And if we're being weird, honestly, if you saw somebody who is being completely authentic and weird at the same time, you may not want to necessarily be their friend, but you also have a subconscious trust right away because you're like, at least I know I can trust them. They're honest. Unless it's a performing type of weird in order to get. But if somebody's a little weird, they're a little off balance, they're a little off kilter, they're just like a little extra, just maybe not what you might see on, like a Susie Homemaker TV show, which I don't even think we really have those anymore. I think if you look around social media now, it's the weird ones that we admire the most. But why do those people tend to go viral? Why do those people tend to build massive businesses? Why do those people tend to become someone that we admire? It's not necessarily because we agree with everything that we do. It's not necessarily because we think that they're funny or they're charming or they're endearing, but they're honest. So honesty creates connection. Her fear was that she would lose connection if she were to be honest. That's what weird really means. It's the vagueness of weird when we think about it that created the suffering. But when we brought specificity to what weirdness actually means, it softened it. It didn't feel like something that we should be scared of. It felt like something that we should be interested in and moving towards. I think when we look at like movies, we see these like quirky people, and oftentimes those are the people that become the most endearing character on the show. Even if they're not the most charismatic, they tend to be endearing anyway. And so her fear of being weird because she think it may lose her connection, what the truth was is that her mind needed to understand more specifically what weird actually meant when we described it in the truth, when we described it in connection to keeping connection. And so I just started asking questions, factual questions of what's required in order to create connection and keep it. Trust. Do we keep trust or lose trust when we're being ourselves? Keep it. If the connection is meant to be ours, right? We're not supposed to be friends with everybody on this planet. We're not supposed to work with everyone on this planet. I don't have fucking time for that. The people who are in my world, I love them. They're awkward, they're weird, they're interesting. Like I can talk to them about anything. Shit doesn't really bother them. I tend to hang out with people who are like interesting, weird, but pretty much flexible, casual, not really judgmental. And when I base my connections off of that and there's authenticity in it, it creates a deeper connection. Then I look at people who are giving me a little bit of a connection, and it's my job to match that. So if we're afraid of losing connection, oftentimes it's because we're over giving on our side of the connection versus noticing like what someone else is willing to give. You know, that oftentimes that leads in resentment. But in this case, her fear wasn't like resentment, or her fear wasn't the relationship would blow up. Her fear was that she would just automatically lose love if she was herself. Here's the thing though, is everything you want, everything you truly want, that your future self wants, everything you want wants you back, but it can only find you if all of you is there. All the weirdness, all the awkwardness, whatever is true. So let's go back to my client who I was talking to in Wealth Alignment Patterns that was afraid to lose lineage, and the stories that oftentimes we tell around, if I have more, I'm afraid to lose. So in this case, she wasn't afraid if she was awkward or weird that she would lose connection. She was afraid that if she was wealthy, she would lose connection, because the stories in her lineage, the stories with her family are us versus them, because that's what we're taught through the media and through stories. We're rarely shown the example of the wealthy human who does great things. It's just not the most interesting story for people. And it also doesn't meet people's cultural expectations. So in this case, her feeling was being dictated by cultural norms and expectations, and she didn't even know it. She had no idea that when she was like working really hard on her business, like I want to get to 200K and 500K, she had no idea that she had this electronic leash around her throat that says you can't go that far because there could be too critical of a loss. And so I said, what would it be like if your family were to see somebody who would do great things with wealth have a lot of it? Let me ask you this. If one of your family members were sick and they needed $150,000 surgery, would you be able to save their life in order to keep connection with them? The answer was no. And so we can't actually truly prioritize connection if somebody really needed it. I remember when my grandfather had passed away when I was younger, and I was in the UK as a new mom and a military wife, and I couldn't afford to go home for the funeral. I couldn't afford that ticket. And so I wasn't able to show up and have that connection with my family and with my grandmother, who just lost one of the great loves of her life. And money would have been really fucking useful in that moment. I've been on the lucky side of being able to quickly financially resource other people in my life who it was a life and death situation when they financially needed support. And because I was willing to break these chains, to remove these electronic leashes that said that it makes me this, I'll be bad, like wealth just amplifies what's already true. And I suspect for you, wealth is going to amplify really fucking great things. And I knew that for my client too. And I said, what would happen if you were resourced and one of your family members had an emergency? It was genuinely like emergency surgery. It's either going to happen or not. And money was the deciding factor. Do you want to be able to be resourced to be able to prioritize your lineage? Because it sounds like you're the one with the calling. God put that desire in your heart. Are you willing to move with it? What calling, what story feels more meaningful for you in order for you to prioritize connection? So let's go back to, I'm afraid I'll lose love. I'm afraid I'll lose it from whoever. A lot of times it's usually family members. Like, I'm afraid I'll lose love from my father. I'm afraid I'll lose love from my mother. Or for her, it was like a whole group of people, of like this group of beautifully proud people who were proud of what they were able to make, the lives that they were able to create with very limited resources. And that is something to be really fucking proud of. But it's also something to be really fucking proud of, to be able to move far beyond that and to show the rest of the world, to show our family what it would be like for somebody who would do really remarkable, impactful things with significant wealth. And the second that she saw that she actually got to keep connection, if she was resourced to help, if wealth was only an amplifier of what she already is, then wealth can only amplify deeper, more significant, more immediate, and more potent connection. That's the truth on the table. And the only reason it had a hold on her before was because the story was vague. So the question is what's the story? What one came up for you? Is it, I'm not capable? Is it, I'm not worthy? Or is it, I'm afraid to lose? And what or who are you afraid to lose? And then take specificity into that vagueness. Okay, what is it that I want? If I'm afraid to lose a person, it's connection. So if I have this, I'll lose connection. There's so much vagueness in that every single time. There's not been a single time where I haven't been able to just ask really clever, very specific questions for any of my clients where they realized, oh my God, actually having what I want, being who I want to be, becoming who I want to become wouldn't lose me any of that. It would restore it. It would deepen it. It would make it more potent. This shit runs so deep, you guys. I had a day the other day where I noticed, like, I walked in the door and I was having a great day. And then my boyfriend's son, Julian, he's like, Andrea, how are you? He's like the happiest kid. The second he sees you, he runs up, he gives you the biggest hug. Doesn't care if all of his friends, he's 17, doesn't care if all of his friends are, he gives you the biggest hug and he holds you. He calls it, he's like, you need a Birkin hug. That's his last name. And he'll just like hold me and he's like, I sensed you needed that. And he just like the connection is there and he's just like vibrant and just brought all of this energy. And he's like, how are you today? And for whatever reason, unconsciously, what came up was like, don't be too happy. I was like so perplexed. I've never noticed this pattern in myself of like, if I'm so happy, then I'll lose what? What I realized was if I'm too happy, the belief was I'll lose help. I'll lose resources. If I'm too happy, if I'm too good, no one will help me. That's such a clusterfuck of a vague ass lie. Because when I look at the evidence, I look at when I'm in a good mood, people are attracted as fuck to me. They want to be around me. The second that the world sees a happy woman, the whole world bends at making her happier. The world becomes an amplifier of your internal state. So it was like such a weird electric leash that I had never noticed was on me before. And I can think back into like so many times in my history where I was like, I just kind of downplayed my joy a little bit because I was afraid. I was so not conscious of this pattern until 2 days ago, you guys. Like, we're all doing the work every damn day for the rest of our lives. Like, we're all here to do the fucking work. I was like so perplexed by my own behavior. I'm like, why did I just shrink back? Why did I just get smaller? Why did I just feel less? What the fuck was that all about? And when I just sat with it just for moments and I got present, I'm like, if I were to show up happy, joyful, all of me, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid people will see me as too independent to where I won't receive love anymore. I won't receive support. And when I say support, it always goes back to love. I'm afraid I'll lose love. Support is a version of love. And I was just like so fucking surprised that even popped up for me. But then when I brought the truth in, remember, like, the lie is always vague. When I brought in specificity of noticing when I have a great hair day, I get the green light, right? When I'm in a good mood, my man comes over and he's like, oh, let me get that for you. He wants to touch me more. He wants to give me shoulder massages. When I take care of myself, when I'm just like in it, vibing with me, giving to myself, the world actually bends over backwards to be the ultimate supplier of significantly more fucking joy in my life. There's not even a shred of evidence, not a shred, couldn't find a single one, that if I were too happy, I would lose love. Not in this group, at least, right? That I might lose connection. In fact, the better attitude I have, the more that I can pivot fast, the more that I'm creative, the more where I'm like, I see other people, if they're kind of in it, I'm like, really curious about them. Sometimes when sometimes if we're a happy little jelly bean and we're around people who are just little rain clouds for a little while, that can piss them off and be annoying. But if I have a good attitude and I'm being my happy little jelly bean, I might look at someone and I might think, it's time to mirror. It's time to bring some calmness into their space. And it's time for me to simply just ask them like, yeah, okay, man, connections are kept. Connections are deepened. Connections are strengthened simply with this one question. You okay? And then pause. That's the hardest part, especially if you're a happy little jelly bean. Sometimes you want to be like, you okay? Can I get anything for you? What do you need? And then when you're like, ladies will especially get this. When you're in your luteal phase just before your period and your man is in like too good of a mood and he's like, hey baby, what do you need? Feeling so good. Like, let's do this. Let's do this. And you're just like, literally, I need you to take your happy ass 5 feet away from me. Right? Like, I get it. Sometimes we all have little rain clouds that follow us during certain seasons. For me, it's predictably 5 days before my period. It's a fucking lightning storm. I think everything is on fire. It's all burning. And then it goes away. And so, but if my man's keeping himself happy, he notices and mirrors. If I'm keeping myself happy, I notice, I mirror. I can adjust my temperament a little bit to make myself a little bit more, I'm going to use this word in a way that is desirable. Most of the time when I use the word palatable, it's like with a little throw up in the back of my throat. I don't want you to be palatable by making yourself small because someone else is uncomfortable. I want you to be palatable when you're moving from your heart and when you're moving from love. And when you see somebody who you're genuinely, you love them, you care about them, they mean something to you, and they're having a tough moment. And you're like, I need to support my person, whoever it is. And you can simply do that by chilling the fuck out, meeting them. Don't be in a bad mood with them, but softer voices, chill. If there's a scared little puppy at your door and you're like, oh my gosh, that puppy looks like it hasn't eaten in 5 days, are you going to run after it and be like, I love you, I love you, I love you? Be your happy little jelly bean self with the scared ass puppy? No, we mirror the puppy's speed. We get down low. We speak really softly. We wait for them to come to us, but we keep our energy open. We stay inviting, right? So like we can do that for other people. But the ability to transform not just our own lives, to keep connection, to have deep richness and depth is there 100% of the time if we focus on ourselves first. If we decide to be the happy little jelly bean, we don't lose shit as long as we have a sense of awareness of our surroundings. It does take a little bit of that. I do know people who have no situational awareness and we love them for that. Everybody has their gifts, right? But for the most part, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably pretty situationally aware. You can read other people, you're listening, you're paying attention to cues. If you're a hyper independent child or if like you grew up that way, you're very good at reading other people's cues. You're very good at mirroring other people's energy. What we're not so great at is keeping our heart open while we do it. What we're not so great at is keeping ourselves filled with connection, depth, love, and most importantly, I hope the thread that has come from all of this, and most importantly, staying in the presence of truth. Not those vague bullshit lies that have been just wedged into our subconscious that keep those invisible leashes on. But once we bring the truth, that leash dissolves, has no more power, because we know the actual truth now. When we're in the presence of truth, suffering eliminates itself. So this particular client, when I explained that to her, instantly, I asked her, I said, now imagine having done all those things. You have the multiple homes, you do this, this, and this. And I said, are you afraid of, I said, be her, close your eyes, put your hand on your heart, and let me ask you, are you afraid of losing connection? And there was no charge. There was no density in her chest. There was no like ick in her stomach. She was like, no. She knew right away. She's like, holy shit, this whole time, that was the key for deeper, quicker connection. If I need to get on a plane and I have money, I can go now. That was such a huge priority for me when I started my business. I was thinking, I'm like, someday my kids are going to grow up and one of them might move away and they might call me and they might say, Mommy, I need you. And if I can't fucking get on that plane, I am going to be a wreck. And one day my daughter woke up and she said, I need to go find myself. And she got on a plane and she left to Paris. And I cried. And then also one day she said, Mommy, I need you. And I got on that plane, fucking first class, bitches. And I flew my ass all the way to Paris. And I had the best, most amazing time in Paris with my baby. I made that vision happen. When I got pregnant at 19, I had no money. I'd been doing drugs. My surroundings was drug dealer, stripper, broke, shitty life, shitty circumstances, shitty attitude. But the day I became a mother, I said, I have to change. I have to become a woman that my kids can be proud of someday. I don't know where your hunger is. I don't know what drives you. For me, it wasn't like, oh, I really want to have, the $2 million home on the water. I got that because it was fun, but it wasn't something that like got me out of bed. The thing that's always gotten me out of bed is making sure that my kids are resourced, that I'm flexible, that I can move with speed in this world, that I can move financially with speed in this world. The second that my discernment says go, it's the flexibility, it's the spaciousness, it's the freedom, it's being able to follow those soul-guided urges instantly with speed and be resourced. And if I'm not resourced now, I will resource myself fast because like I said, shit happens. Sometimes the earth cracks and somebody's on the other side and you've got to build a bridge, or the earth cracks and your dream is on the other side and you've got to build a bridge. God doesn't fucking care if you know how. He just wants to know, are you willing? So my sweet Leah, I'm going to gift you my program, Future Self, a gift from my mommy heart to your mommy heart. Thank you for sending in this beautiful request to have this chit chat with me today. And the last thing that I'm going to leave you and everybody else listening is, starting from this moment forward, figure out who you are, who you want to become. And I can promise you that the singular, most direct path is choosing to be the happy little jelly bean today. Because that bitch is resourced, she's smart, she's fast, she's creative, she has will, she has energy. And the second she decides, she is gonna fucking figure it out. And I know you will too. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, please leave a comment, subscribe, review, but also click that share button and send this to 3 friends. Because I can guarantee you are one of those people that believe sharing is caring, and you have 3 women in your life that you're like, you know what? It's time for us to check. Is there anything that's creating this fear of, I'm not capable, I'm not worthy, I'm afraid of loss? And how can we bring truth into the bullshit vagueness that's been keeping us stuck so we can all live a fucking resourced, happy, exceptional, more alive life? More alive is the standard. For anybody else who wants our Future Self program, It's called Future Self Activation. Check the link in the description, and I will leave you guys a special little Easter egg coupon code just for my podcast listeners today. I love you.